stepmom married my dad shortly before his death. Now she wants his house. My father died 3 months ago. He was 54 years old. Let me back up a bit. My dad wasn't always the broken man he became in his final years. He was a contractor, worked with his hands his whole life, built decks and additions for families all over our county. He was the kind of guy who'd help a neighbor fix their fence on a Sunday afternoon and refuse payment. Strong, dependable, the kind of father who taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook. Then my mom died 6 years ago. Sudden heart attack at 49. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. Dad fell apart. I mean, completely shattered. He started drinking heavily within weeks of her funeral. At first, I thought it was just grief, that he'd work through it. But months turned into years, and the drinking only got worse. He stopped taking jobs, stopped paying bills. I'd come by his house and find him passed out on the couch at 2 in the afternoon, empty bottles scattered across the coffee table like fallen soldiers. The house, the one my parents had lived in for 20 years, went into foreclosure. Dad had stopped making mortgage payments about 8 months after Mom died. By the time I realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late. The bank took it. Everything my parents had built together, just gone. I had just bought my own place about a year before all this happened. A 3-bedroom ranch-style home on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I was 28, working as an electrical engineer, finally stable enough to own property. When I saw what was happening to Dad, I couldn't just let him end up on the streets, so I moved him into my place. He took the spare bedroom, and we figured we'd work through his issues together. That's when Kayla entered the picture. I met her about 4 months after Dad moved in. She was at the grocery store, and Dad was with me. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, wearing expensive-looking clothes that seemed out of place in our small town. She struck up a conversation with Dad in the produce section, of all places, said she thought he looked familiar. Dad, even in his deteriorated state, was flattered by the attention from someone so young and pretty. She started showing up more, coffee shops where we'd go, the hardware store when I was buying supplies for house repairs. Always a coincidence, always friendly. Within 2 months, she and Dad were dating. I was honestly shocked. This young, attractive woman was interested in my alcoholic father who was pushing 55? It didn't make sense, but Dad seemed happier than he'd been since Mom died, so I pushed my suspicions aside. They got married 8 months later. Quick courthouse wedding, nothing fancy. I thought it was rushed, but Dad insisted he didn't want to waste any more time being miserable. Kayla moved into my house. I told Dad I wasn't comfortable with this arrangement, but he begged me. Said he'd start contributing to bills, that Kayla was going to help him get sober, that everything would be different. It wasn't. If anything, Dad's health got worse after they got married. He started having these spells where he'd get violently ill, vomiting, weakness, confusion. Kayla would take care of him during these episodes, always sending me away, saying she had it under control. She'd make him special meals, smoothies, health drinks, said she was trying to detox his system from all the years of substance abuse. The strange thing was, Dad seemed to be drinking less, but he was getting sicker. I suggested multiple times that we take him to a doctor, run some tests. Kayla always had a reason why we should wait. Too expensive, Dad was embarrassed, he was getting better, just give it more time. 13 months into their marriage, Dad collapsed in the kitchen, seizures, complete system failure. By the time the ambulance got him to the hospital, he was in a coma. He died 3 days later without ever waking up. The doctor said his organs had just given out. Years of heavy drinking had taken their toll. It was tragic, but not unexpected given his history. I was devastated, but also, shamefully, a little relieved. Dad had been suffering for so long. At least now he was at peace with Mom. Then Kayla started asking about the house. At first, it was subtle. Questions about the deed, about Dad's assets, about what he'd left behind. I explained that Dad didn't own anything. The foreclosure had wiped him out. Everything he had, which wasn't much, had been in my house because he'd been living with me. That's when her tone changed completely. She showed up at my door 3 days after the funeral with a lawyer, claimed that as Dad's surviving spouse, she was entitled to his share of the house. I was confused. I explained again that this was my house. I'd bought it 2 years before Dad even moved in. My name was on the deed, the mortgage, everything. She insisted that didn't matter. Said that because Dad had lived there for over 2 years and they'd been married for most of that time, she had legal rights to the property. Her lawyer, some sleazy-looking guy in a cheap suit, started throwing around terms like marital property and spousal inheritance rights. I got my own lawyer. A good one. He reviewed everything and told me I had nothing to worry about. The house was solely in my name. Dad had never been an owner, never paid into the mortgage, had no legal claim to the property whatsoever. Kayla's case was completely baseless, but she wouldn't let it go. She filed a lawsuit, demanded that the court recognize her claim to 50% of the property value, claimed that Dad had been paying rent and making improvements to the house that increased its value. All lies. Dad never paid me a single dollar in rent. I wouldn't have accepted it if he'd tried. And improvements? The man could barely get out of bed most days. The legal battle dragged on for 6 weeks. My lawyer was confident, but it was still stressful and expensive. I couldn't understand why she was pushing so hard for something she had no legitimate claim to. Then, during the discovery phase, things got interesting. My lawyer subpoenaed the marriage certificate. Something about it seemed off to him. He sent it to a forensic document examiner, someone who specializes in detecting forged documents. The marriage certificate was fake. Well, partially fake. The certificate itself was real enough, but Dad's signature had been forged. The handwriting analysis was conclusive. My father had never actually signed his marriage license. This changed everything. If the marriage wasn't legally valid, Kayla had absolutely no standing to claim anything. But it also raised a much darker question. Why would she forge the marriage documents? My lawyer suggested we might want to involve the police. If she'd committed fraud to marry my father, what else might she have done? I was hesitant at first. Dad was gone. Did it really matter now? Then I remembered all those times Dad got sick. The mysterious illnesses that started right after Kayla entered his life. The way she'd always push me away when he was at his worst. Those special meals and drinks she'd make just for him. I went to the police with my concerns. They agreed it was suspicious enough to warrant investigation. They requested Dad's medical records and the autopsy report. They interviewed the doctors who treated him in his final days. And then they found it. Dad's blood work from his final hospitalization showed elevated levels of certain compounds that shouldn't have been there. The doctors had missed it initially because they'd been focused on organ failure and hadn't been looking for anything sinister. But when toxicology ran a more detailed analysis, they found traces of antifreeze, ethylene glycol poisoning. That's what had really killed my father. The symptoms matched perfectly with what Dad had been experiencing for over a year. The vomiting, the weakness, the confusion, the eventual organ failure. She'd been slowly ending his life, little by little, probably mixing small amounts into those health drinks she always insisted on making for him. The police obtained a warrant for her arrest. They went to the apartment she'd moved into after I'd kicked her out of my house following the lawsuit. She was gone. The apartment was nearly empty. A few pieces of furniture, but all her personal belongings were cleared out. The landlord said she'd paid through the end of the month but had left suddenly 2 days earlier. She must have known they were getting close to figuring it out. Maybe she had a contact at the hospital, or maybe she just got paranoid when the police started asking questions. Either way, Kayla vanished. The police found out her real name wasn't even Kayla. She'd been using a fake ID. Her real name was Michelle Torrens, and she had a record in 2 other states for fraud and identity theft. No history of violence, but the pattern was clear. She targeted vulnerable men, worked her way into their lives, and tried to take whatever she could. She'd seen my dad at that grocery store, probably noticed his expensive watch, the one my mom had given him for their 20th anniversary. Maybe she'd followed us home, seen the house, assumed it was his. She'd planned the whole thing, got close to him, forged the marriage documents, and then, when she realized Dad didn't actually own property, she decided to just speed up his death anyway and try to claim the house through me. It's been 2 months since she disappeared. The police have a warrant out for her arrest. Her picture is in the system, but so far, nothing. She could be anywhere. Different name, different identity, already working her way into some other family's life. I think about Dad every day, about how lonely and broken he must have been to fall for someone like her. How desperate he was for connection after Mom died, that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. Part of me is angry at him for being so blind, but mostly, I just miss him. Miss the man he was before everything fell apart. I still live in the house she tried to steal. Some days it feels tainted by everything that happened. Other days it feels like a victory that she didn't win. That despite everything she did, all the lies and manipulation and horror, she walked away with absolutely nothing. The prosecutors told me that if they ever catch her, I might be called to testify. I told them I'd be there in a heartbeat. Not just for me, but for Dad. He deserves justice, even if he's not here to see it. I've changed all the locks, got a security system installed. I'm probably being paranoid, but after everything that happened, I can't be too careful. Sometimes I wonder if she's out there watching, waiting, planning some kind of revenge. Other times I think she's already moved on to our next target, some other family that has no idea what's about to hit them. If there's anything I've learned from this nightmare, it's that you can never really know someone, that grief makes people vulnerable in ways we can't imagine, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who smile the sweetest. I hope they find her. I hope she faces consequences for what she did to my father. But even if they never catch her, even if she gets away with it forever, at least I know the truth. At least I know that my dad's death wasn't just a tragic end of a man who couldn't cope with loss. Someone took him from me. Someone calculated and cruel who saw my father not as a person, but as a mark, an opportunity, a means to an end. And I'll carry that knowledge with me for the rest of my life. If anyone reading this has elderly or vulnerable family members, please watch out for them. Check in regularly. Meet the people in their lives. Ask questions. Trust your instincts when something feels off. I ignored the warning signs because I wanted Dad to be happy. I wanted to believe that someone could love him the way Mom had. That willful blindness might have cost him his life. Don't make the same mistake I did.
Related comments. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be the unpopular opinion here. While what she did was absolutely horrible and criminal, I can't help but feel you share some responsibility for what happened. You saw your father deteriorating. You saw him getting sicker after she came into the picture. You had multiple opportunities to intervene and get him proper medical care, but you just didn't? Because she said, wait? I lost my husband to a similar situation, and the guilt of not pushing harder for answers eats at me every single day. I'm not saying you're to blame for her actions, but please, anyone reading this, if someone you love is getting worse and worse, don't take no for an answer. Demand tests. Demand answers. Be annoying if you have to. It might save their life. Author. You're absolutely right, and I think about this every single day. I was trying to respect boundaries and not seem like I was interfering in their relationship. My dad had told me multiple times to back off, that Kayla knew what she was doing. I was also dealing with my own life, work stress, and honestly some denial about how bad things really were. You're right that I should have pushed harder. I'll have to live with that forever. But I also think it's important not to blame victims' families too harshly. These people are experts at manipulation. They know how to explain away concerns, how to isolate their targets, how to make you feel crazy for questioning them. Hindsight is 20/20. Comment. Former mortuary science student here. The antifreeze thing is actually more common than people think. It's sweet tasting, which makes it easy to hide in drinks, and the symptoms mimic so many other conditions that it often goes undetected until it's too late. In cases of chronic low-dose exposure like your dad experienced, it causes kidney damage that looks almost identical to damage from long-term substance abuse. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't some impulsive crime of passion. This was calculated, premeditated ending of a life. The fact that she had priors for fraud in other states suggests she's done this before, maybe just never escalated to this level. OP, you might want to reach out to law enforcement in those other states where she had convictions. There might be other suspicious endings or disappearances connected to her that nobody investigated because they look natural. Author. Holy shit, I never thought about that. My lawyer mentioned something about contacting other potential victims, but I thought he meant fraud victims. I'm going to call the detective on the case tomorrow. This is terrifying to think about. Comment. Am I the only one who thinks this story sounds fake as hell? A 20-something woman marries a 50-something alcoholic for a house that isn't even his and just happens to have the expertise to slowly administer poison in exactly the right doses to mimic natural organ failure, and then conveniently disappears right before getting caught? And the marriage certificate was forged, but nobody noticed until months later? This reads like a bad Lifetime movie script. Either OP is leaving out massive chunks of the story, or this is creative writing practice. No offense, OP, but the timeline doesn't add up, and the whole thing is too convenient. Answer. You clearly haven't spent much time in small-town America or around people who commit fraud. This is exactly how these things play out. The woman probably didn't have expertise. You can literally look up symptoms and methods online in 5 minutes. The marriage certificate thing isn't suspicious either. Most people never verify those documents unless there's a legal dispute. County clerks process hundreds of marriages and don't authenticate every signature. And yes, criminals do often flee before arrest when they sense police are closing in. Your skepticism says more about your limited life experience than OP's credibility. Comment. Attorney here, though not your attorney, and this isn't legal advice, I'm glad you lawyered up immediately.
A lot of people in your situation would have tried to handle it themselves or just given in to avoid conflict. The forged marriage certificate is key here. That's federal fraud if she used it for any official purpose, which means FBI could potentially get involved if she crossed state lines. Also, even though she fled, you can still pursue a civil judgment against her. If they ever catch her or find any assets in her real name, you could potentially recover your legal fees and more. Document everything. Every expense, every hour of lost work, every therapy session if you're seeing someone. When they catch her, and they often do eventually, you want an ironclad case for restitution. Author, thank you for this. I am seeing a therapist now, actually. Never thought I'd need one, but processing all of this has been brutal. I'll make sure to keep better records of everything. Comment. My mom went through something eerily similar, except the guy didn't go as far as your dad's wife did. Mom's boyfriend, she's 62, he claimed to be 58 but was actually 71, moved into her house after 6 months of dating. Started talking about marriage, about combining finances, about how they should refinance her house to get a better rate, which would have put his name on the deed. My sister and I intervened hard, got her to a lawyer, did background checks on this guy, found out he'd been married 4 times before, and each ex-wife had restraining orders. When we confronted him with this information, he tried to say we were just jealous and trying to keep Mom lonely. She kicked him out that same day. He tried to sue her for compensation for home improvements he'd made. He'd replaced 1 broken cabinet hinge. The case got thrown out. These predators are everywhere, and they specifically target people who are grieving or lonely. Your story made my blood run cold because that could have been my mom if we hadn't caught on in time. Question. For OP, you mentioned your dad's doctors initially missed the antifreeze in his system. Were they just not looking for it, or is it actually hard to detect? I'm asking because my uncle died last year in similar circumstances, married a much younger woman, got sick, died within a year. And now I'm wondering if we should have pushed for more extensive testing. His wife inherited everything and moved to Florida like 3 weeks after the funeral. We all thought she was just cold and opportunistic. But maybe it was more than that. Author. From what the police explained to me, standard toxicology screens don't always test for ethylene glycol unless they have a reason to suspect it. It requires specific tests that are more expensive and time-consuming. In my dad's case, they were focused on treating his organ failure and assumed it was from years of drinking. It wasn't until they went back and did targeted testing that they found it. If you have any suspicions about your uncle, please contact the police in his jurisdiction. Even if it's been a year, they might be able to exhume and test. I know that sounds extreme, but if there's even a chance something similar happened, his wife shouldn't get away with it. Answer. I'm calling them tomorrow. Thank you for responding, and I'm so sorry for what you went through. Write what you think about this situation. Also, if you like this video, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.